First, I'm going to cover we're going to walk through the 4 most common mistakes that I see leaders make regarding culture. This is especially tailored toward more early stage startups. So this is really helpful just to know that that's who's in the room. That was my sense of who would show up and wanted to just check. I'm going to give you like specifically how to overcome those obstacles so you have some action plans. I'm going to help you identify your one next action so you leave here with a thing to go and do or to start paying more attention to. And then I'm hoping we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. As part of this webinar, we have a chance to make our own little microculture here together. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get to the material, but there's 2 agreements that I'm going to propose for our culture here today. The first one is confidentiality and what others share. So if there's a question that someone brings that is really specific to their business, I want those questions to be able to be here. And I'd like you just to hold that as confidential. You can take whatever content I bring to bear, and you're welcome to share that in any way. And the second one I'm going to propose is that you bring your experience. This can be good, bad, even ugly. This is a chance for us to learn together. I'd love any examples from your company that you want to ask in the Q&A. If you're confused at any point or you have a question in the moment, please do raise your hand. I want your full experience in the moment of what's happening. And just to make sure that we're feeling good with those 2 agreements, could I just see some raise of hands to say like, yeah, I'm good with that. I'm good with this kind of microculture that we're going to spend some time together today. Right. Most of the hands up. Cool. If you have any questions on that, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, but let's dive in. All right, mistake number 1. The first mistake that I see most leaders, founders making around culture is this idea of like, I think of just culture reductionism. We start to like narrow down what we think of when we mean culture into just a small set of things. And usually they're the most observable, most doable sort of things. And I don't want to say that these things are bad. There's just a lot more in the menu. Usually this looks like something like culture becomes perks and culture becomes some kind of nice story that we tell. And it becomes some colorful t-shirt, or we've got this like kind of like interesting swag of some sort. When you're in an interview with a candidate and they ask what the culture's like, you know, perks and a nice story and a shirt are fine, but they're not really compelling answers. Anybody can copy this. And so we started to take company culture and make it about a few small little things. And I think in particular, this just becomes a path to mediocrity. It's easy to copy. I see culture as, for every business, is either a headwind or a tailwind for your business. And competing on perks and competing on a nice story just becomes this endless headwind. You have to keep up with other companies keep doing, offering new things, trying to be this like cool place to work. And essentially you're just trying to convince people over and over again why you're special and unique. This happens for 2 reasons. And yeah, this happens for 2 reasons. The first one is what I call the leader's culture building dilemma. So if you're a founder or a leader of a early stage startup, you've got a ton on your plate. It's really hard for culture to ever be the number 1 priority. And I think it almost never is the number 1 priority. And when there's other things to do, you're in this perpetual dilemma. Is now the time to spend and invest in culture? And I think the answer for most people tends to be no, now's not the time. I'll do it in the future. And it just becomes this thing that gets deferred and deferred and deferred. My sense is you're already overcoming this just by being here at this webinar. You're taking some time to make this a priority, and I acknowledge you for that. The second reason this happens, and this is a trap that I fell into, is I just had no idea what to do. There's a lot of work to be done. There's people to hire. There's a business to scale. There's fundraising to do, on and on and on. I can keep naming all the things. And even if you've got like an hour to spend on culture, it's not clear how I can actually make that hour impactful right now. There's a lot of material out there on sort of the philosophical side of culture, and it gives you like these ideas of what it might look like, but there's not really a whole lot of clarity on what exactly to do. And so this is why my colleague and I wrote Scale Without Losing Your Soul. We built this kind of like 6-phase model called the Culture Building Roadmap. We're going to touch on a few parts of this today. I'm not going to walk you through it all. You're going to get a free copy of the book. If you want to really check it out and dive deep, go for it. What I really wanted to do with this book and with this model is give a clear framework for how you can think about methodically building culture at an organization that is full of sort of action and doing instead of like thinking and wondering. So we'll touch on some of this in particular as you look at the other mistakes that happen. The second mistake I see happen is this idea of like borrowed culture. When I was leading my last business, I believed in the potential of culture. I knew it was something I really wanted to build, like a unique company that brought the best out of my people. And I had no idea what to do. So with almost everything where I had a question like this, I go and do some research. I started to look around on what other companies do. And what do other companies do? Or at least what can you find out there? You'll find all kinds of blogs and articles and things about company core values and examples of company culture decks. And I started just digging through these and I started finding things, oh, that's kind of interesting and that resonates. And I started to like piece some of these things together into what I thought sounded like a good culture. And really, I was just borrowing a bunch of ideas, and borrowed culture just doesn't work. There's an example of this that happened in a company that I know of, where a senior executive was hired from Netflix to come into this early stage startup to help them start to like scale their company. This company hadn't articulated their culture in any way yet. And so the senior exec showed up and said, hey, why don't we just use Netflix culture? And just took their culture deck and said, like, let's just start using this as ours. And it didn't work well. It didn't work well for that hire because it wasn't theirs. It wasn't who they were, even if some of the ideas are compelling. And so the alternative to this is to really take some time to discover your essence. And this is built on a belief that your company has an essence or a soul, or if that sounds too spiritual, then a DNA. There's something that is unique to you. There's a unique way that you do business. If you're inside the Mucker ecosystem, you've met other founders of other companies, and while you're all trying to build a business, you probably can feel into like there's different ways we see things. There's different things that are important to us. And discovering your essence is really the starting point to me, for any culture building activities, like really understanding who are we, what is our identity, what makes us unique. And when you are in this phase, what you're doing is you're trying to unearth or trying to like dig up these like, this is so us behaviors. Like someone would be like, oh, that's so us if we do that thing. I'll give you a couple examples in a few moments. How you do this is you play the role of like anthropologist. You're like looking at this, civilization or group of people and trying to like deeply understand them through like curiosity. How you do this is through interviews or focus groups. We've got a lot of teams that are like of 10 or smaller. A lot of times it's just like noticing what's happening around the table or what's happening in the Zoom meetings. You don't need to go into focus groups when you're that size. You just need to like be asking some of these questions. When are we at our best? One that I love, if we could clone if our company, if we could clone them, if we could just start to replicate this person, would like rapidly propel us forward. At our last company, was a guy named Aaron. And he was like, wow, well, what's so special about Aaron? He works really hard. He's really honest about things. He's super nice. And it's like, if we could have more Aarons here, we'd be able to grow fast. And what's different about working here? This one's especially useful to ask people who are new to your company. So they've just gone through an interview process. They've met a bunch of companies, and they chose to work with you. And so what's different about us? What things are you feeling into? And you'll get a bunch of material from this. With this material, you'll start to see themes emerge. This is a screenshot from an exercise I did with a company where I ran the focus groups and interviews, and start to see these themes emerge of like who they are. And then from there, you have the raw material to design a culture code or some articulation of who you are and the culture you intend to build. I don't care about the phrase culture code. You can call it a blueprint, but I think blueprint's useful. Like this is the blueprint of the company you're trying to build. What's most useful about this is you're creating a single source of truth, like one thing that you can always go back to that articulates what you stand for, the behaviors that matter most, and facilitates all those conversations. And I'll show you how to use this as you go forward.